How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good buddy out there on the West Coast, Nick. How you doing, man?
Doing well, doing well. I can smell the football in the air. Like it just feels like college football is getting underway. And the NFL, we're just 2 days away. We're recording this on the Tuesday evening before the Thursday night Chiefs-Ravens game. And you can just feel it. I feel like I can feel it all the way in the ends of my fingertips that like football's here. And I'm so
Football
stoked about
is here. Yes, football is
it.
here. We've had a week of college football.
Mhm.
Not much. I feel like not much in that first week to really talk about. There were a couple good games. Definitely Florida State is a surprise, and maybe we'll take some time later to talk about that. But today, as you said, we are 2 days out. It is 8:47 p.m. Central Time, so we're just about 48 hours away from the start of the 2024 NFL season. And with that, it's time to make some predictions. We've done our awards prediction, but now it's time. Now it's time for the real stuff. Now it's time for who is going to win on the field, and who's going to be making a run at the Lombardi Trophy this year. So let's just get right into it. We're going to start by talking about the AFC East. Nick, who do you have taking the division down this year? The AFC East is an interesting division. Obviously, you have Buffalo, who's sort of held the reins there for the last 4 or 5 years, I feel like, at this point, basically since Brady left. But Miami's had some flashes. In theory, the Jets are going to be better if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy all year. So, Nick, sort of, what are you thinking?
So for me, I've been really wrestling with the Bills and the Jets. And for me, I'm sticking with my guns and I'm sticking with the Buffalo Bills being the winner of this division. I just feel like for me, when you look at just what this team lost, it feels like a laundry list of players where Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Trey White, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Matt Milano injured for a good bit of this year, it seems like, and going to be out. Mitch Morse. But it feels to me when I look at that laundry list that because of injuries last year and in past years, as well as what seems like a deterioration of really high end play, that I really don't feel like this team is losing as much of high end contributors as some might make it out to be. Where I just really don't worry as much about Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Trey White. Trey White has not been the same player since all of the injuries piled up for him, an ACL and Achilles. He was an elite corner many, many years ago, it feels like now. But him leaving to the Rams, it doesn't feel impactful. Hyde and Poyer as leaders, I think, matters. But neither of them played at a super high level in the last year or so, and both of them had experienced injuries. And so I feel like the safety play could struggle a little, but I really trust in Sean McDermott to generate a really good defense. And if you just look at the last couple of years, I feel like the defense has just been consistently good. It's been consistently in the top 10 with ease. And I really feel like if you look at the Buffalo Bills, there's no marquee like superstar defender. There's no TJ Watt, there's no Aaron Donald, there's no Fred Warner, there's no super stud all pro defender. And yet they just churn out really good defenses year after year. And I think a good defense plus Josh Allen, and I don't think Stephon Diggs really had the impact last year as he had in years past. So I don't think the Bills will have much fall off. And I think the Jets are actually going to be not too far behind them, claiming my top wild card spot in the AFC, I believe. So those will be my two playoff teams out of the AFC East. I do have the Jets as claiming the 5 seed being the top wild card for the AFC as well.
Okay. Do you have record predictions for the teams or not?
I do have record predictions. I was just kind of slotting them in the playoff seed spots. And the Jets, I just feel like Aaron Rodgers plus a more stabilized offensive line plus Mike Williams, if he's healthy for a reasonable length of time, could really generate a quality offense with this quality defense that should be able to win games that other teams just aren't able to consistently output good offense and defense, I would say, ideally. And so I feel like they don't have that all-star generator of an offense like Josh Allen, who's an offense by himself. But I think that they should have the structure and support to be able to generate good offense with Aaron Rodgers. Not because of him necessarily, but with him.
Makes sense. When I look at this division, I'm with Buffalo winning this division. When you sort of look at their schedule, I see 5 games that are losable games for them, and then I see 12 games that I would call it an upset if they lost. So the 5 games that I'm like, I actually think that they're going into these as the underdogs are Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City, San Francisco, and Detroit. And outside of those games, I think all of the other games are games that it would be surprising if they lost. So that's not to say that they're definitely going to lose those 5 and definitely win those other 12, but I do think that it'll sort of balance out to their at 12-5. I do have the Jets and the Dolphins sitting at 9-8 and just barely not making the playoffs this year. When you look at their squads with their with their schedules, they're not as easy as with Buffalo. Granted, they're all playing the AFC South. I'm pretty sure I have Houston sweeping this division actually when I think about it. So they're playing the AFC South, but outside of Houston, I'm not seeing teams there that are going to give guys some trouble. And then they're playing the NFC North, I think.
NFC West.
NFC West, right, because San Francisco. And they're playing the NFC West, which for Buffalo, I think San Francisco is the only team in that division that they would lose to. But with Miami and the Jets, the Rams are going to be interesting. Seattle always seems to win a few games that you're like, why is Seattle in this game? So I don't know. I'm not as high on the Jets and on the Dolphins this year. The Dolphins, I definitely didn't really see much improvement this year. I really just saw okay, things just keep kind of falling off. Of we've paid guys and we're running out of money and we traded these draft picks to get these guys. These guys are good, but what do we have to bolster this roster? They lost Gesicki this year, who was a great option for Tua. So I'm just not really high on Miami this year. I don't think they make it back to the playoffs, and I think the Jets are just barely a couple games out there. But I do think it's going to be a competitive division. I guess we should mention the Patriots briefly, who I think are not going to do very good. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, the AFC West, AFC East. That's where I have it. I've got Buffalo as the 4 seed. So at 12-5, I have them as the 4 seed.
Gotcha. I have them as the 3, so a little bit better. But
okay.
Yeah. The Dolphins, cool. I agree with you. I don't think they're getting back to the playoffs. I'm really concerned about their defense without Christian Wilkins and with both of their primary edge rushers injured last year late in the season. And They drafted an edge rusher with their first overall pick, who many people don't believe in, Chop Robinson, as a really high-end impact, quick off the bat player. Right. And so I'm really concerned with that, plus losing Christian Wilkins. It feels like that defense that wasn't great last year might just be even worse this year. And the offense, I don't have any reason to think why it will be better than last year, to be honest. And that concern.
And I mean, you look at Miami's schedule, and really we just need to look at the back half of their schedule. They are at the Jets. They are at Cleveland. They are at Green Bay. All of those starting like Thanksgiving weekend and beyond. And Tua has a name in front of him, or has a resume in front of him of what he does in the cold. So I also feel like you're going to get to the end of the season, and I don't know, you might be in a place that you've got to win some games. I actually have them losing 5 of their last 6 games because they go to Green Bay, they host the Jets, they host the Texans, they host San Francisco, they go to Cleveland, they go to the Jets. I mean, that's not going to be a cakewalk there at the end of the season. So we'll see sort of how Miami ends up, but I think we both agree they're going to be falling off a little bit. All right, so moving on to the AFC West, and Nick, the way I look at this division, you have Kansas City and you have everybody else. I've got Kansas City winning this division. You look at their schedule, and I mean, I think they might win 15 games. Like, I'm just, and if they don't, if they have a season like last year where they go like 11-6 or whatever in the regular season, I don't doubt them in the playoffs. So I've got them going 15-2, winning this division handedly, being the 1 seed in the AFC. Do you see it any different?
I see the Chiefs as being the number 1 overall seed in the AFC as well. And I really don't see them stumbling as they did last year, because it felt like last year they really stumbled due to some really struggling offensive players, as we'll put it, I guess, last year, with some very bad receiver play. And I don't see them as necessarily having those same weaknesses, ideally, if Hollywood Brown can get back healthy, because he'll be out for a couple of weeks here, it seems like. But I agree with you that they could be in line for 14, 15 wins, and that's a whole hell of a lot of wins. I also do have the Chargers also making the playoffs, I believe. I have them as the 7 seed, and I really view this as 2 big additions as compared to last year's team that would really generate this kind of winning. Or for me, Jim Harbaugh, I feel like the just jump in terms of overall intelligent, put together coaching, I think is a huge deal. And I think a healthy Herbert for a whole season makes a whole world of difference. Where I don't think having Herbert for a whole season, well, if you have a healthy Herbert, it'll never result in 4 or 5 wins if he's healthy the whole season. It just never will. When you have a superstar quarterback, it just won't result in awful seasons like that. And so if you just view Herbert with last year's team, I think if he was healthy the whole year last year, they probably would have been 7 or 8 wins. And so I think this year, if you're looking at 7, 8 wins with better coaching, although the weapons have obviously deteriorated due to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams being gone, I do view it as just better offensive line play, quarterback play, and coaching. And those are 3 areas that I really value. And so I have them sneaking in with the 7 seed.
Yeah. I don't have them making the playoffs. I do have them going 10-7. They have, when you look at their schedule, they really have almost like a Jekyll and Hyde schedule. So, they have to play Kansas City twice. They're playing the AFC North this year, which we will be getting to next. I think the NFC North is going to be really, really strong this year. But also they play Las Vegas twice and they play Denver twice. And I don't see why they wouldn't be able to win all 4 of those games. They also play the NFC South, which I don't think is a pushover division, but definitely isn't, going to be a team or a division that it's like they might lose to all 4 of the teams in that division. On top of that, because they played so bad last year, their other AFC opponents are New England and Tennessee, which I think should be 2 wins for them also. Again, unless something weird happens. So I see them definitely improving, definitely stepping up, going 10-7, which I actually think is a bigger step up than you would even think, considering all of the weapons that Herbert now no longer has. But I think this is a rebuilding year for them, and a rebuilding year in which they take a step forward, which will definitely, I think 2 to 3 years from now, the Chargers will legitimately actually be competing for the AFC West division against the Chiefs. And who knows, maybe even, steal it from them and Kansas City gets in as a wild card, which sounds crazy because it's like, well, they'll have Patrick Mahomes, but you never know. You never know how
Another addition that's kind of under the radar with the Chargers is the defensive coordinator that Jim Harbaugh brought, being Jesse Minter, was his defensive coordinator with Michigan and is from the same lineage as John Harbaugh and was a Ravens defensive coach. And he's built in the same vein as Mike McDonald, who's now the head coach for the Seahawks. And I really believe that particular defensive scheme is probably the most adept to beating modern offenses currently, where the Mike McDonald scheme's the only one that seems to give the Kyle Shanahan scheme fits. And so I feel like that type of defense should really be able to translate to the NFL when Jim Harbaugh, who's a proven head coach in the NFL and college, may need somebody to help carry the defensive day, he really gets some stability there as well.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's been the thing holding this team back is the defense. I mean, when they hired Brandon Staley, it was like we're bringing in a defensive minded head coach to help with that. And boy, it did not go well. But I'm with you. I trust Jim Harbaugh when it comes to coaching a lot and the staff that he's bringing in. I definitely agree that it'll do good things for this Chargers team that seems to be every year have high expectations and end up lackluster. Moving on, let's move on to the AFC North, which Nick, this division houses your favorite team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I also know that you are a very you are much better than I am at holding back your biases and seeing things how they are. So I'm intrigued to hear how you see this division playing out.
I view this as a really great division, and I actually, contrary to last year, where last year the Steelers, the Browns, and the Ravens made the playoffs, I actually have none of those teams making the playoffs this year. I have just the Bengals making the playoffs this year out of the AFC North, and I have them set to be, I believe, the 2 seed. Yes, that is correct. I have the Bengals as the 2 seed. I have the Ravens missing the playoffs. I think the loss of Mike McDonald to Seattle is a huge loss, as well as Patrick Queen. And really, in all honesty, I feel like this team is probably set up to be one of the teams with the most drop-off in terms of compared to last year's team. And really, in all honesty, Mike McDonald, along with a bunch of other defensive staff, it feels like left the Ravens. And I feel like the Bengals have just been sitting kind of preparing and putting together a team that is really set to explode with their quarterback, Joe Burrow, healthy. And I feel like this might be the last year that we really get to see this version of the Bengals with T. Higgins on this team to be able to exploit a lot of teams in the league that don't have 2 good corners staying with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I feel like they could really be able to abuse those wide receiver matchups, as well as ideally, I think they really improved their offensive tackle situation. I think that Trent Brown, as well as their rookie out of Georgia, who is partially injured now, I think, as well, who's a big old 6'8" offensive tackle out of Georgia, who was their 18th overall pick. I think the levels of Orlando Brown's their other tackle as well. But I think they have 3 reasonably quality NFL offensive tackles, and that's something they haven't had 2 of in the last 5 years. And so I think an offensive line and receivers and Joe Burrow and a good defensive coordinator with Lou Anarumo, I think that that's a really complete team. That maybe the biggest loss would be DJ Reader, who wasn't healthy the last half of last season. And so this team who won 9 games last year without Joe Burrow, I think could really pop and get to 11 or 12 wins pretty reasonably.
Interesting. That is so interesting. So I also have Cincinnati winning the division. I think they're looking at their schedule. I think they're going to win 14 games this year. And yeah, I agree with you. Everything you said about how much better they're going to be. And if Burrow is healthy, one of the big things that we have to think about is Burrow had knock on wood, entirely healthy training camp. He hasn't had that the last couple of years, and so Cincinnati has gotten off to a slow start. But I see no reason why they aren't going to have a fast start, especially when you look at the beginning of their schedule. So they open the year with New England, then they have a tough game against Kansas City, then Washington, Carolina, tough game against Baltimore, and then the Giants. You're looking at those first 6 games. I see 4 guaranteed wins. I actually think they're going to win all 6 of them. I think that they're that much better.
Man, wow.
I really do. I think they're going to go 14-3 and win this division. Wow. Now, where we are completely off is I actually think the AFC North is sending all 4 teams to the playoffs this year.
Whoa! Oh my gosh!
I do. I know it sounds crazy, but I've got Cincinnati in at the 3 seed. I've got Pittsburgh in at the 5, Cleveland in at
Cincinnati
the
the 3
6.
with 14 wins.
Yeah, I've got
Wow.
I've got Cincinnati at the 3 with 14 wins. They lose a tiebreaker to Houston. I've got then Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Baltimore all at 11-6. Pittsburgh has Pittsburgh goes 8-4 in conference. Cleveland goes 7-5. Baltimore goes 6-6, and so they go 5-6-7. I look at these teams. I think a lot of people are talking about like, man, the Steelers got shafted with their schedule, right? You look at their last 9 games. 8 games is Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati. And where a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like that's so awful for them. I look at it as they've got a lot of very winnable games at the beginning where they can figure stuff out. And let's say that Russell Wilson isn't the answer. I think even if Russell Wilson isn't playing great, you should beat Denver. You should beat Indianapolis. You should beat Las Vegas. You should beat the Giants and the Jets. And you could figure out, hey, Russell Wilson isn't the answer without sacrificing losses like you would if you're opening the season with Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Cleveland in your first 5 games. So I actually think that, yes, the schedule is rough, but I think because of the weird situation that Pittsburgh's in with their quarterback play, I think that it might actually be to their advantage. Cleveland is going to have one of the best defenses in football. What Jim Schwartz did with that side of the football with that team last year was phenomenal. And I think it's going to be good. I think they're going to be good. I think that what last year proved is that Cleveland's defense is good enough that their quarterback play can not even be average. It can be bad, and they're still going to be a good team. And I don't think Deshaun Watson is going to be Houston Deshaun Watson, but I mean, dang, it's hard to be worse than he has been, And I think even if he steps up a little bit, just gets a little bit more comfortable, a little bit better, then this team can easily win 11 games. Baltimore, I do think there's going to be the fall off, like you said. But I look at their schedule and I don't think it's crazy. They play Kansas City, and that's going to be, to start the season. I actually think they're going to win that game just because Kansas City, I feel like, always kind of seems to start the season slow in those first couple games. Granted, I have them winning 15 games this year. But, last year was also first game of the season, ring night, and Detroit came in and beat them, And so I can definitely see Kansas City losing that game to Baltimore. And then you just kind of look at it and, they'll like beat up on each other, but I feel like the rest of their schedules don't have a lot of, gauntlets that they're going to go through from other teams outside of their division. And yeah, I see this, I also see teams kind of beating up on each other. So I have Pittsburgh beating Baltimore both times this year. I have Baltimore beating Cleveland both times this year. I have Cleveland beating Cincinnati both times this year. Like just sort of the way those matchups are going to work out. But yeah, that's really interesting that you have one team out of the AFC
You
North.
got all of them.
Since they expanded to 3 wild card teams, everyone's asked like, okay, is this going to be the year that what are the divisions? And especially looking at the AFC, like I feel like, and we were talking before we started a little bit about how strong the NFC is, and I feel like what's kind of under the radar is how much the AFC is actually kind of fallen back. There's a lot of teams. It's like, well, we're not ready to beat Patrick Mahomes yet, so why go all in? It's like, okay, we're still not ready to beat him yet, so why go all in? So I don't know. I just see a really, really strong AFC North this year. So we will see how that plays out.
Wow. And you have a bunch of teams, it sounds like, with a huge amount of win totals. Like that just in the AFC, like it felt like the Ravens last year getting to, I think, 14 wins. Like that was like, whoa, they won a ton of games and got that 1 seed. But wow, having 3 teams with 13 plus wins, you said 14 plus wins?
Yeah, so the thing
Wow.
is, you look at their schedules and they just kind of stay away from each other. Like you have Baltimore. Let me go back and look at this. You have Baltimore and Kansas City playing each other, and Cincinnati and Kansas City play each other. But then you look at the rest of Kansas City's schedule, and hosting Buffalo and hosting Houston are the other 2 hard games there. So like outside of those 4 games, and even if they lost all 4 of those, and those were their only losses, they still win 13. We're about to talk about Houston. Buffalo at 12-5, I think is, they're like the worst division winner at 12-5. But again, they're like staying away from each other. The intra division matchups aren't as bad for these teams this year, as well as who is it? The AFC North plays the NFC East this year, and I've got a lot of question marks with the NFC East this year, which we'll get to. But we got to finish the AFC, rounding it out with the AFC South. Nick, this is a division that I actually do think is more interesting than some people might think. That being said, I think a lot of people have said some things about some of the teams in this division that I'm like, okay, let's kind of hold our horses and let things get proven first. But Nick, how are you looking at the AFC South?
So I've actually got the Texans not winning the division and the Jaguars sneaking out the division with, I believe, a tied record would probably be around where I would be leaning. I just feel like the Texans, for me, I feel like last year the teams that popped were the Texans and the Packers. And I feel like both of those teams exceeded expectations last year. And I think that the Texans smartly didn't overdo it this year in terms of really like going all out and like trying to make this year their Super Bowl year. I think adding Stephon Diggs was an interesting play, and I think some of their defensive additions were good. But I just feel like in some ways, although CJ Stroud I'm super, super high on, I feel like in all honesty, the Texans kind of overachieved in terms of their team's actual talent. And if you look at just some of their additions and subtractions, I just don't feel like they're very impactful overall. Where Jonathan Greenard and Danielle Hunter just being switched out, I view both of those players as good players. Danielle Hunter better, but like not by a huge amount. Azeez Al-Shire, I really like at linebacker, but Blake Cashman's played really well, so I feel like in some ways it's a 1-for-1. Joe Mixon and Devin Singletary, at this age, I'm not 100% sure that Joe Mixon will really be a high-end contributor at any level. And I feel like Stephon Diggs will be able to do some really good receiving things, but I don't really feel like he's a ceiling raiser necessarily at this point in his career. And I feel like in some ways having a wide receiver who has a diva factor with a very young receiver with other really high-end receivers, like this is going to be the first time in Stephon Diggs' career in the last 7 years, I would say, that he's clearly not the number 1 receiver, let alone he might be the number 3 receiver. And although I think he could do a really good job feasting on number 3 corners, I feel like it could start really getting really messy very quickly. And the other thing that I'm really questioning about the Texans is that last year they had one of the easiest schedules in the whole league, where their schedule combined had a winning percentage the year prior of 43% overall, which is a bad winning percentage.
Right.
And this year, their teams that they're playing against on their schedule has a winning percentage of 52%. And so going from teams that are objectively bad to teams that are winning teams, I think is going to be a little bit of an adjustment in terms of just the week-to-week grind. Because when you don't have those weeks where you're able to just pick up easy wins, and I think that because the Texans won in the playoffs, we feel like, whoa, they've arrived. They're a Super Bowl level team. But they still only, I believe, had 9 wins last year, maybe not 10 wins last year, I believe, 9 or 10. Let me check. I'm pretty sure. It wasn't 11, I don't believe. It was 10-7, same record as the Steelers. They really 10-7, and in the AFC, that you're really high on the AFC in terms of their win totals. I feel like 10-7, and I don't know necessarily why they would win a ton more games this year is my thing, especially with the more difficult schedule. And with Trevor Lawrence healthy in the division, in all honesty. I think a healthy Trevor Lawrence stabilizes the Jaguars to really being a good team.
Yeah, the thing with Jacksonville is, one, I just don't really trust their defense. I do trust Trevor Lawrence. I do think he's taken a step forward. I don't think that he is going to be an MVP candidate this year, like some people have said, that if he plays the way he played in that one preseason game all year, then he's going to take the Jaguars to the AFC Championship game. And I'm not there yet. That's a big if. But the other thing for me with Jacksonville is I look at their schedule and they go Miami, Cleveland, Buffalo, Houston as their first 4 games. I could see them losing all 4 of those games. Like that's not an easy start. Throughout they also play Green Bay, Philadelphia, Detroit, Houston again, the Jets, as well as their inter-division opponents who, for whatever reason, somehow they always find a way to drop a game to either Indianapolis or Tennessee, no matter how good those teams are. So to me with Jacksonville, I feel like it's I'll believe it when I see it. I think since having Trevor Lawrence, they made the playoffs once and got smacked by the Chargers.
No, they actually the Chargers had a huge lead and Jacksonville won.
Yeah, they got smacked by the Chargers until the Chargers went full Chargers mode and just stopped playing football. And then I think the next week they played Kansas City. It was not pretty.
It was close. No, it was close, actually. Mahomes got injured late in that game, and they still eked it out, I believe. I think that was the anything can happen game when Henny came in and threw the – no, was it not?
No, that was the year earlier against Cleveland.
No, you're right. I think Mahomes was injured, though, again against the Jaguars late in that game as well.
Okay. But, So maybe, I'm not saying that Jacksonville isn't going to be like an easy out this year, but I believe in Houston. They definitely were ahead on their, 3-5 year plan with competing. But I liked that they weren't complacent about like, we were ahead. And so let's rest on those laurels and see what happens. I like that they're like, okay, we're ahead of schedule. Fine. Then we'll go and do the things that we would have been doing the following offseason, assuming we were in this place next year. So I actually really like the addition of Joe Mixon to pair with Dameon Pierce. I think Joe Mixon by himself, is not what he used to be, but I actually think that he'll do a really good job playing alongside Dameon Pierce there and having Devin Singletary just as another back to give some reps to. I really, really like their offensive line. I also really like their defense. So I don't know. I'm high on Houston. I've got them winning this division and being the 2 seed. So
just a note here, the Titans I actually have as one of the most improved offenses in the whole league in terms of how it looks. I'm a Will Levis guy after last year where he really passed the eye test for me in terms of toughness and ability and really impressed me a lot.
Yeah. Well, moving on, the way I have the AFC, I have Kansas City as the 1 seed winning the AFC West. I have Houston as the 2 seed winning the AFC South. Cincinnati is the 3 seed winning the AFC North. Buffalo is the 4 seed winning the AFC East. Then Pittsburgh at the 5, Cleveland at the 6, and Baltimore at the 7. Nick, what does your final AFC bracket look like?
Wow. So for me, I got Chiefs the number 1 seed, Bengals the 2, Bills the 3, Jaguars the 4, Jets getting to that 5, Texans the 6, Chargers the 7. Notably, I have no other AFC North teams up in there. And I also don't have the Dolphins as well as my beloved Titans that I have seemingly adopted. And besides that, not a lot of other huge upsets, I would say, in my rankings. But
All right. Well, moving on to the NFC. We're going to start in the NFC East. The NFC East is a really, really weird division. Just it always is. Dallas won it last year, which means there's no chance they win it this year. Because of that, not just because of that, but also because of the way that Dallas seemingly hasn't tried to get better this offseason. They didn't make a coaching change. It's like, if you're not going to make it now, then when are you going to make it? They finally paid CeeDee Lamb because he's the only one that's threatened to hold out. Dak and Micah Parsons haven't, but they both need to be paid. The offensive line is not going to be as good. Their running backs are Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott, which, if this were 2018, would be a really, really badass running back core. Unfortunately, it's 2024, and they're getting wheeled out of their retirement facility to play football on Sundays. Let alone the fact that their biggest need on defense was linebacker. They didn't seem to address that. Deron Bland is out indefinitely, I think.
6 to 8 weeks, I think, was the projection.
Oh, okay.
Many weeks.
Right. Yeah, he's out half the season, basically. So I just really don't see. Yeah, there was nothing that moved the needle for me about what Dallas did this last year. If anything, they got worse. And so I don't have them winning the division this year. I have it going back to Philadelphia. I have the Eagles winning this division, but I also have a lot of question marks about Philadelphia. Honestly, like, you look at what happened to them the fall off last year. It was weird. It wasn't like it was an X's and O's thing, because they started the season 10-1. It was like, it was just this weird like, just vibes mindset thing. And so we'll see if that gets better. I think it'll get better enough that they're going to win the division. But funnily enough, I actually have them having a worse record than they did last year when they were a wild card team, but winning the division. So I have them going 10-7 this year, being the 4th seed in the NFC and winning the NFC East.
Wow. Very cool. I also have the Eagles winning this division. I do as well have Dallas making the playoffs. And I have the Eagles actually as the number 1 seed in the NFC. And so I really quite like the offseason additions the Eagles made. And in all honesty, I feel like the Eagles added certain things that make their team markedly better. And for me, I honestly don't think the things that left their team make them much, much worse. Where I think coordinating last year obviously hurt them a lot. And I don't see any reason why their coordinating should be any worse. And they obviously won a bunch of games last year. The addition of Saquon Barkley, I think, fundamentally changes how you have to deal with that team, where it feels like that team can just churn out really quality running back seasons. And I think Saquon Barkley, still at this age and this point in time, the athlete that he is, can really be a game changer and can really be the Christian McCaffrey to San Francisco type of transformational, allowing them to really take a lot of pressure off the quarterback. And I really think the changes in the secondary are what really sold me on why the Eagles kind of fell apart in some ways in terms of the late season losses. Although obviously the vibes were awful, their defense was just allowing people wide open, just running wide open receivers everywhere. And I really like CJ Gardner-Johnson. I really like Kenyon Mitchell. I like Cooper DeJean. The addition of Devin White, I think, is kind of under the radar a little bit. I think Bryce Huff fills in for Hassan Reddick, who was traded to the Jets, which we still don't know what's going on with him. But I think that there were supplementary moves and there were game-changing moves made by the Eagles. And I think that that's something that Dallas obviously didn't do. It feels like the quote-unquote game-changing move was Mike Zimmer, and it feels like Mike Zimmer probably isn't a huge upgrade in terms of their defensive coordinating. And it seems like their team, although Deron Bland is out, they are getting Trey Diggs back healthy. But with their running back situation and their offensive line who is their offensive tackle? Man, I'm so awful. He's a really great offensive tackle. But I feel like the situation in Dallas in terms of why should their offense be better than last year? Why should their defense be better than last year? And the answer is, I don't really think it should.
Yeah.
And so they're really the only two players in this division. And I have it probably same as you with them just flipping this year.
Yeah, I don't have Dallas making the playoffs. I have them going 9-8 and just barely not getting in. One notable thing, a team that I do think is going to be really fun to watch is going to be Washington. I think as long as Jaden Daniels stays healthy, they're going to be really exciting. I have them only winning 6 games, but it's a rookie quarterback in his first year that he's starting in game 1. And we've seen the way that plays out before. Yes, CJ Stroud did what he did last year, but like you mentioned, they only won 10 games. It's not like they went 13-4 or something like that. So I do think Washington gets better. I like the direction that they're heading, but they're just still a couple years out, especially with trading Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. And I think it's worth noting that I think by week 8 or 9, Daniel Jones is benched and probably gets cut.
Drew Lock, right?
What?
I think Drew Lock's the backup on that team. Some Drew Lock action in New York.
Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, So, but yeah, I think there's a chance the Giants are bad enough that Dayball loses his job, which is crazy considering they won a playoff game 2 years ago. But it's just kind of the reality of that situation. Moving on to the NFC West. This is a division that put 2 teams into the playoffs last year in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Nick, what do you think the NFC West is going to look like this year?
I really like the 49ers. I think there's no reason why they should be markedly worse than last year. I don't think they should be better necessarily, but I don't think there's going to be a massive fall off for the 49ers in Santa Clara. I still have them winning the division. I think the Rams are kind of bailing water with Aaron Donald's retirement, where I think them replacing him with the 2 defensive linemen that they got from Florida State was good and was a solid job replacing him. But Aaron Donald's still a superstar Hall of Famer, potentially top 3 defensive player ever.
Right.
And so I think that even at the advanced stage of his career that he was in, that he was still a game changer, and that the Rams probably shouldn't be any better than they were last year. And I think that Stafford in his older age, as well as Puka Nacua, has been injured lately. He's had a hamstring injury, I think, which with Cooper Kupp and his injury history, it feels like their receiving situation could get messy pretty quick. I also, too, have the Seahawks sneaking into the playoffs this year with the 7 seed in the NFC. I really, if you're talking about this division, I think this is a really quality division with, I think Matt Stafford is good. I think Purdy's good. I think that Geno Smith is good. I think that Kyler Murray is good. But I think that we kind of just gloss over. It's like, hey, wait a second. The Seahawks had 9 wins last year, and primarily they underachieved. And I think Mike McDonald can be a game-changing defensive mind. And I think that their offensive tackle situation should be healthier. It's like, hey, what's the weakness of the team? I just look at it on paper and I'm like, okay, their receivers I like, their running backs I like, their offensive line I like. Geno Smith, I'm a big Geno Smith fan. I think he's probably a top 15 quarterback. I think he's around 15 for me, maybe a little higher than that. And honestly, I remember when he first got a couple of starts when Russell Wilson got injured, and I'm like, okay, I think he's 85% of like prime cooking Russell Wilson. And 85% of that dude is really, really good.
Yeah.
And so I really like the Seahawks and think that their matchup, especially with like they lose a bunch of games to the 49ers or the Rams often. And I feel like their defensive scheme should make those matchups in division more tolerable. I'll put it that way. So
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the Seahawks and think they'll be able to get there.
Interesting. I have San Francisco winning this division again. I have them getting the 1 seed. It's I don't see. I don't think San Francisco got worse. They did end up working it out with Brandon Ayuk. We found out today they've got it all worked out with Trent Williams. Trent Williams, a very strong leader in that locker room, said he came back because of wanting to be there for his guys. In the midst of the Ricky Pearsall thing, which is crazy. I saw he was back in the weight room today, 48 hours after taking a bullet to the chest. He was back in the weight room today. Now they've put him on the PUP list, so he's not going to be playing for the first 4 games. But still, crazy. Miracle by God that he is doing what he's doing right now. But I think that that's going to be that incident is actually going to be something that brings this team together a little bit. I mean, it brought Trent Williams back before making any headway on the contract. They're still going to be talking about it and are going to get something done. But he's like, you know what, I'm done holding out. So I really buy into what San Francisco has this year. I think they're going to be the 1 seed. I also have the Rams making the playoffs again as a wild card, but this year as the 5 seed. I do really, really like. The joke has been, F them picks, for the Rams for a while. But you know what? I think they had picks again and they used them really, really well. Jared Verse is an absolute beast. I think he was like you said, there's no replacing Aaron Donald. Like that's just not going to happen. But the guys that they brought in, I think they made the best decisions they possibly could to try. And so I really believe in the Rams. I believe in I believe in the Rams. I believe in what Stafford can still do. I know that he's at the end, but I feel like he's going to be similar to Peyton Manning at the end, where it's like you don't really see like, okay, he's like really falling off, but he is just getting older. I'm surprised he's as good as he is now, considering how deteriorated he had to have been from playing in Detroit all those years. I also think that the Rams had a lot of guys that you wouldn't expect really show a lot of promise last year. And so I'm excited to see them get, another year under their belt and see what McVay can do with this team. So I've got San Francisco winning the division as the 1 seed. I've got the Rams coming in second place, but getting the 5 seed, that top wild card spot.
So you like?
What was that?
So you like the Rams in terms of like having them the 5 seed in the NFC. I like the NFC a lot more this year than I did last year. And so 5 seed, like they got to win a good number of games and like do a really good job against the conference for that.
Yeah, I think genuinely that this division isn't going to be won until the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's gonna be won by San Francisco because of the games that they have at the end of their season compared to the Rams. But that the Rams are going to be right there the whole way. I think Seattle is going to be really, really frisky this year. I think they're going to win games that teams aren't expecting them to win. One of those things being, I think they're actually going to beat the Rams in the last week of the season. That is going to help solidify San Francisco into the 1 seed. But I also think that, I don't know. I feel like Seattle is this team that every year it's like, man, they're competing in games that it's like, why is Seattle competing in these games? And I feel like over the last few years, they've won more of those than they've lost. And so I don't know. I just have a hunch that the luck is just going to kind of run out. They do have a new coach. And there's going to be transition that comes with that. It's not going to be, just really, really easy, smooth stepping in there, especially because of the way that the coaching change happened. It wasn't like with Los Angeles that it was like, okay, Brandon Staley is a terrible coach, and it's very clear that we need to move on to somebody else. And Jim Harbaugh is absolutely an upgrade. With Seattle, it was like Pete Carroll's been there for a while, won him a Super Bowl. Owners were sort of like, hey, I think we should move on. He's like, I don't really want to, but okay, reluctantly,
Right.
steps away, but not necessarily like, okay, well, Seattle has only won 5 games the last 2 years. Like 2 years ago, they made the playoffs. Last year, again, they fought through some adversity and won more games than you would expect. So I just think this is sort of like, okay, this is where Seattle has their down year under a new coach, but then we'll turn it around the following year immediately. So NFC North. This is a division that is near and dear to my heart because my Detroit Lions are in it. I've got the Lions winning the division this year. I think that they gained more than they lost over the offseason. CJ Gardner-Johnson did leave, but he also didn't play for most of last year. They basically played most of the year without him anyway. The biggest loss for the Lions that I'm a little concerned about is that they lost Josh Reynolds, who was one of Jared Goff's preferred targets, one of those just guys that he trusted because of his time with him at the Rams. But at the same time, Amon-Ra St. Brown is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sam Laporta proved that he was exactly who he thought he was last year. Jahmyr Gibbs is Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery comes back. Jameson Williams made significant strides last year. He's looked great in camp so far this year, and I think he's really going to finally sort of come into his own. And so I'm really high on Detroit. I do have them as the 2 seed behind San Francisco. Also in the NFC North, I'm not entirely drinking the Jordan Love and Green Bay Packers Kool-Aid. I do think that Jordan Love is a good quarterback. I still am not sure if I would have paid him yet. I would have liked to see another year out of him. But Green Bay was, I'm pretty sure, the youngest team in the NFL last year, and they made the playoffs. And so
they're still the youngest team this year, actually, in the whole league.
Yeah, which is nuts. But they got that experience, and so I think that experience is going to bring them back into the playoffs. So I do have them as the 6th seed as a wild card, making it in. I have Chicago with a winning record. I do have them going 9-8. It's hard to just look at the roster and think that they're not going to win some games. I'm not willing to ordain Chicago and Caleb Williams as the division winners and the team that has a target on their back yet because they haven't done anything yet. But Chicago is going to be a good team. And unfortunately, until I see a full season of good production from Sam Darnold, it's just hard to imagine that they're going to be competing for a playoff spot. I think they're going to lose a lot of games close. I don't think they're going to be a pushover maybe I think the Giants will be, but I also do think that they're going to have a top 10 pick in the draft next year. It sucks that JJ McCarthy is out for the year. I would have really liked to see this team with him because I do think it's a much different team if he's there at quarterback. But that's football, and we'll see him next year. So that's the way I see it. Nick, how do you see the NFC North?
I get you, Jack. I agree with you that your Lions, I think, are going to win this division. And I have them as the 3 seed, I believe, after the Eagles and then the 49ers. I actually view this as one of the more competitive divisions in terms of overall quality teams. I also agree with you that the Packers, I think, have a ways to go about proving themselves. And I actually have them missing the playoffs. And I have the Bears making the playoffs as the 6th seed actually this year. And I like I don't know that I would say that I drank the Kool-Aid for Caleb Williams, but I might have drank the Kool-Aid for Caleb Williams. And I honestly think, like, as a rookie in this offense for Caleb Williams, this year is their ceiling if everything worked out for the offense, a top 5 offense. I think it might be. I think that ceiling, if everybody stayed healthy, if everything got put together this year, with those receivers, that tight end, that running back situation, I really like Caleb Williams and really think that this could easily be one of the most fun, explosive, multiple variety of attacks kind of offense in the whole league. Where DJ Moore being a number one's awesome, but Rome Odunze as a number 3 receiver on your team, or a number 2 receiver with Keenan Allen and a really good tight end in Cole Kmet, with on top of that Caleb Williams throwing them the ball, I think this is probably going to be the best offensive situation any of them had ever in any of their careers, which is saying something, because they've all been with quality players in separate situations. And so I really like the Bears and really think that a defensive coach elevating the defense and a bunch of offensive talent should create a really balanced, really quality team. So I think this team is going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. And I have them as the 6th seed.
Interesting. How is that interesting? All right.
That would also set up a wild card matchup against them, which should be pretty fun too. A little division matchup in Detroit.
Yep.
Be good.
That'll be something. So, last division we have the NFC South. Nick, tell me about the NFC South. What are you seeing happening here?
NFC South, I really liked Baker and the Bucks last year, and I really have some struggles with why they should be able to repeat, where I just feel like the roster's kind of been deteriorating a little bit. And I think that last year they kind of caught a couple of breaks in their division. And I really think that really the big thing for me for why they'll be held back a little bit is their secondary with age of their weapons. And I really just think that Kirk Cousins stabilizing the offense for the Falcons gives them a level of week-to-week consistency on offense that I don't know that, especially I think because the Buccaneers lost their offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, who did a really good job last year. I think that it's just a situation that has more questions, when the primary question I would say for the Falcons is Kirk Cousins' health. And I really think that Kirk Cousins doesn't need to be running around all over the place with a great Achilles. I think he needs to be able to have a healthy enough Achilles to take 2 steps in the pocket. And so I think that the Falcons, with their roster, should be able to generate quality week-to-week offense, as well as good defense with their pickups they've had. Matt Judon and who's the safety from Denver that they got as well? Justin Simmons. Yes. I think that they should just be a quality team on both sides of the ball, and quality on both sides of the ball really matters to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've got Atlanta winning this division. I've got them going 11-6, being a 3 seed this year. I know this sounds crazy, I've got Tampa Bay going 10-7 and being the last wild card spot in the NFC this year. They have a really tough front-loaded schedule, but then their last 7 games are New York Giants, Carolina Panthers, Las Vegas Raiders, Los Angeles Chargers, Dallas Cowboys, Carolina Panthers, and New Orleans Saints. And, you know, I look at Dallas and the Chargers. Actually, they host the Chargers. But I look at Dallas and the Chargers as the 2 games there that it's like, you know, that'll be competitive game. But, you know, Mike Evans is Mike Evans, man. You know, he's going to have 1,000 receiving yards this year. It's going to happen. I like Ronald Jones. I think that Tampa Bay, though, I don't think Tampa Bay got necessarily that much better this offseason, but I think that their schedule and their opponents and the fact that they have Baker and Baker has confidence again, like he hasn't had since 2020 in Cleveland,
Right.
I think is going to lean toward a good year for Tampa Bay. So my final NFC side of the bracket, I've got San Francisco at 1, Detroit 2, Atlanta 3, Philadelphia 4, Los Angeles Rams 5, Green Bay Packers 6, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the 7.
We got the same division winners in a different order as far as seeds. I got Eagles 1, 49ers 2, Lions 3, Falcons 4, Cowboys 5, Bears 6, Seahawks 7. I really feel like I might flip the Lions and 49ers. I just feel like 49ers have some more things figured out. But
Yeah.
I think the NFC's got a bunch of good teams, with teams like the Packers not making it, teams like the Bucs on my side, or the Rams and Packers not making it for me in the NFC. Like, that just shows to me that the NFC has gotten markedly better.
Yeah.
And so I'm really stoked, looking forward to 2 conferences that have 10 plus quality teams in them. I think it'll be a bunch of fun.
I think it's interesting, at least for me, looking at the AFC. I feel like you have a lot of really, really good teams, and then a lot of really like a lot to prove teams, whereas the NFC just feels a little bit more balanced from top to bottom. I feel like you look at the AFC and you have Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Houston. I would put, like Cleveland and Baltimore in that group too. Potentially Pittsburgh, but then it's like, at least to me, it's like then there's a steep fall off, with a couple teams there in the middle, like the Chargers and the Dolphins, but then a lot of unknowns, like even the Jets, who, should be an above 500 team this year, might sneak into the wild card. It's also like, well, that is going on a lot of what we hope this looks like, not what we've seen this look like before. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited for the year. Nick, who do you have winning the NFC?
NFC, I haven't nailed it down, but I would probably lean Lions at this point. I just feel like their roster is really well put together at this moment. And I just feel like the 49ers are kind of primed for a pullback. And I don't know that the Eagles have put together enough quality coordination along with talent, along with Jalen Hurts putting it together to make me feel confident they can make it that far. But I really like Ben Johnson and the Lions and Dan Campbell's toughness. So I like your Lions. I do. And so I'd probably go with the Lions.
I asked you first, so if you said it, it wouldn't look like I'm just a biased bandwagon, because I also have Detroit win the NFC. I have Kansas City coming out of the AFC until Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, or CJ Stroud prove otherwise. I'm betting with Patrick Mahomes.
I got to ride with Patrick Mahomes. He's that dude.
Yeah. So a Detroit Kansas City Super Bowl looks like that's what we both have. I hope we're right, because it'll make me happy. So, All right. Well, hey, Nick, it's been a pleasure as always talking sports, talking NFL. First game of the season this week. Oh man, I'm so excited. Even though it is a Thursday night football game, which means even though it's Kansas City and Baltimore, probably will be a stinker of a game. No, that's not true. Kansas City Detroit was a really good game last year.
And we get a Friday night game this week. We got Packers Eagles on Friday night in Brazil. Could be fun.
Yep, it'll be a good time. So thank you all so much for watching, for supporting us, and we'll see you next time.
NFL's here, everybody.
Let's go.